All right, good evening, everybody. We're just about to get started. Once again, it's the last minute schedule, so we appreciate Mike Del Vecchio, our longtime past president and current board of directors of Tri-State. And current railroader working at Bayway Refinery, running the railroad down there as train master. So we're really happy to have Mike back giving a presentation. Mike's going to be giving an awesome presentation on EL 1700, which is the NS Erie Lackawanna Heritage Unit, which is a real Erie Lackawanna locomotive. We're also going to take a look back, since it's been quite a while since DLNW 663 was restored into its Lackawanna scheme. So we're going to take a look back on a little bit of tri-state history as well. So with that, Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you just run through your 1700, and then I'll come up and I'll flip it over.
Okay.
And just down arrows to proceed.
Down arrow to proceed.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much, Rich. And let's get started. Norfolk Southern was formed in 1982, and for their 30th anniversary, 40th anniversary, Wick Mormon, who was the president of the railroad, but he was quite a rail fan. He decided a way to celebrate would be to paint the brand new locomotives in vintage paint schemes. So this is the collection. They gathered at Spencer Chops for a special party, and this was terrific. Now, Tri-State had a hand in helping them with the research and connecting it with EMD, which still had drawings. And the Lackawanna unit was, we had direct input on the Lackawanna unit, and they used our lettering and things that we used on the F3, which were all taken from EMD drawings, which I purloined in 1989 with the FT celebration out there. So kind of cool. So it pointed anything.
Oh, the down arrow.
I did.
Let me take a look.
Yeah. I can just tap one here.
Try again. Try now. There you go.
Can I go backwards? There you go. All right, the SD45, popular engine of many. The demonstrators came out here. This shot is at Port Jervis. And that's where EL fell in love with them. And here's the EMD builder's photo of the SD45s. And there's our cover girl. 3669 is the one. Norfolk Southern still has 5 of them on the roster, and they keep rebuilding them. They were built with 20-cylinder engines. They were rebuilt with 16-cylinder engines because the 20 cylinders just became odd. Everything in the locomotives now is 16 cylinders. So to standardize the fleet and parts, they put 16 cylinders in engine. I got to run one of these, and they're really neat engines with the newer engines. And their signature look is the giant fuel tank. EL ordered that 5,000 gallon fuel tank, hoping they could get from Croxton from New Jersey to Chicago and back. Well, they couldn't. They get halfway back, so they still have to fill them up. But NS still, they don't fill these tanks all the way today. But when those tanks are full, they would pull anything. There's some more pictures of 3669 in service. Here it is climbing the hill out of Scranton. Same thing, right around the bend at Nayoc, the tunnels right to the rear of the photographer. He had to hike quite a ways to get in here for this. But these were signatures. Like Tom Nemeth was here last week, and chewing the fat with him. He said they didn't go out after these things much on the EL because it was the same old all the time. It was always 2 SD45, always 2 SD45. All right, so after Conrail, they renumbered it to 6654. So this is, we call these cockroaches because of the CR. That was the cockroach paint job. And then once Conrail painted them, they looked pretty sharp. These things were pretty much helpers on Horseshoe Curve for most of their life on Conrail because of that big fuel tank. They fill it with fuel and they can shove anything. So back here it is on Horseshoe Curve or near it. All right, in 2001, Norfolk Southern and CSX split up Conrail. They both tried to buy it. The stock price was going through the roof, and the ICC said stop. They made the 2 CEOs sit in a hotel and work out a deal. And the deal was the shared assets area, because they couldn't figure out how to split up New Jersey, Detroit, and Philadelphia. Conrail shared assets became the entity, so these things were assigned to shared assets and became Norfolk Southern in 1700. And this is pretty much what they look like. Now, when the Heritage Program came and NS reached out to the rail fans to help with the research. So that's how we got involved in the Heritage Program. I knew Bill Schaefer, who was one of the STEAM program leaders back then. And so we talked them into, originally they were gonna paint one of the big engines, Erie, Lackawanna. So we talked them, since they're doing an Erie unit, do a Lackawanna unit. And then you've got, these are original Erie Lackawannas. If you paint one of these EL, it fits the mold and everything, so that they agreed to it. So this is 1701 and 1702. This is crossing over to Staten Island. That's the AK draw in the distance. It's right near where I work, you know. And I'm standing on the Goppels Bridge, the brand new Goppels Bridge is a beautiful place. It's where you can park near the school and walk up on the bridge, and the views are terrific. Highly recommended. And this is a normal end shot. You can go up there with any camera and get a decent picture. All right, so 1700 disappeared. It was coming to Bayway almost every day. And it disappeared for a few months. And then the rail fan rumor mill said, oh, it's down in Chattanooga. So we're crossing our fingers, hoping. And there it was, it shows up. Looking like that. And what makes this different from the heritage units is this is authentic. All the others are brand new engines and old paint jobs that were adapted to fit those engines. And this is the real McCoy. This is what it looked like, except for the number board. And Chattanooga took the horns off the front and moved them to the long hood, which is the current NS style. But the black engine still had the horns with the Erie Lackawanna mounted up, but little detail. Still, for a long time, it was coming to Bayway every day. So that's Mark Schmidt, Tri-Stater. He was a conductor and a train master at Bayway. So one day he was conducting, I posed in there with the engine as we're making a move. And since we know the crews, I can climb on, do whatever I want, including run the engine now and then. And that's the Morris Center Erie switcher sitting under the pipe, waiting for Conrail to clear up. Railroading can be fun, you know. It's nice when you love the railroad. You know, the trainmen who hate the railroad, boy, they're tough to work with. But so we can't show you pictures inside the plant, because that's a big security issue. And especially now that it's broadcast and archived. But this is all in the Chemical Coast Secondary, today known as the Garden State Secondary. But in the CNJ days, it was a Chemical Coast. It is still one of the most money-making stretches of railroad in America. They haul more tons of more stuff on this little piece of railroad. And there are some rail fans on Conrail, because we didn't do this, someone else did. It showed up that way, so I had to record it. Here's the puddle that never drains. Bayway is at sea level, and that puddle is at sea level. So it never drains. It finally got them. They did some track work here. Finally got them to flood that with stone, so that you can drive on it without wondering what's under there. So, and then of course it comes by at night in the winter time. This is the Bayway Refinery. This has been published before, so I know I have permission to publish it, but first stop for oil is that stack there. They call that the pipe stills, but that's just a big still, and they boil the oil, separates you know, crude, bunker C at the bottom, gasoline, kerosene, diesel, all at the, you know, midway, and up the top comes the gas. Gas as in butane, propane, propylene, and that gets piped to somewhere else. The two big stacks, that's the catalyst cracker, the stuff that doesn't separate at the still. They add a catalyst to it to get it to further separate, so they're able to monetize the entirety of a barrel of oil. The two stacks are a particulate scrubber. It takes the solids out of it and filters it out. So that's all steam coming out of there. So,
Could you get rid of the arrow, Mike?
what arrow? Oh,
I'll get. There you go, thank you.
there you go. Traditional wood refineries are these flares. When you see black smoke, there's a problem. That means something, there's not emergency, but just something went wrong and they divert stuff. They divert feedstock to the flares to burn it off. So they can fix whatever the problem is. When there's no black smoke, that's a controlled burn. They do it intentionally. And you'll see this a lot, just when they're, when they're clearing out a tank or. In our case, when they unload butane cars, they have to force nitrogen into them and then when the cars are empty, the nitrogen still smells like butane, so they suck it out and burn it off because you can't do anything else with it. It's not saleable. What's significant about this flare, and I keep an eye on it because that flare was at the 39 World's Fair. That was in front of the Petroleum Administration building as an oil derrick. And the World's Fair ended in 1940 because of all the goings on in Europe. So everything got taken to, the fair ended for the war effort and all the European countries pulled out. So this thing was dismantled and Standard Oil sponsored the display. So they took it and they reassembled it here and they use it for a flare. That head is different than all the other heads because it's the oldest. It's since been replaced, but I'm glad I got a picture of it when it was still, the original. I think the. Well, what do we do, Rich? He's not advancing.
Right now.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, it's not the end. All right, there's the new Gothel Bridge in the distance. Conroe conductor throwing the switch. Storm light, airplane. We're on a flight path to Newark Airport. And every 90 seconds a plane goes by. So it's kind of fun. The most fun is when the president's in town. Because the F-15s show up and clear the air, so it's like an air show. They're flying around like flies, and saw one do a complete vertical climb, and then the Air Force One graceful. Whoops. So we go back. Yeah, all right. And there's the new Goethals Bridge, moon set. When Mark's kind of Erie operated it, this was after they got word that Watco was coming. This is our engine. Oops, damn it. The bouncing thing. Here's the new Watco crew with the Watco engines. And they'll be working tonight. I'll see you guys again. There's our two engines back to back, which is a rare occurrence. Usually run two crews, one engine each. And that's from my office. That's the desk sitting there, shooting through the screen. That's along the turnpike. That's the old Simmons Lead. Back where that train curves around, used to cross Park Avenue and serve the Simmons Beauty Rest mattress factory, which is long gone. So we still call it Simmons Lead. We like the old traditions.
Like, what are the engines started?
Those are Sioux Line, Milwaukee Road, Goslings. Those are MP15 ACs. This was Christmas Eve at the refinery. And there's the three engines we have. The blue one is a rental. When you have two engines and two crews, you gotta have a third engine. That's all there is to it, because you gotta take them down for maintenance. There we are again, working together. This got added later, but it's also authentic. I think Paul Tupacheski made those up and the crews put them on. This close to Newark Airport, I'm surprised the drone will take off, but it does. It just can't go over 150 feet, but I use it as a portable step ladder anyway, most of the time. You get tired of helicopter shots pretty quick, so we're usually right at cab height, just like the old Don Furler postulate, right at cab height. But well, there we are together. In fact, I had the engine pull up onto the clear there, so we get all three of them. you know, in one shot while they were setting off. And this is deep in the heart of Cancer Alley. This is one of the, you know, very profitable piece of railroad.
Nice.
The guy, the conductor liked the picture when I showed it to him, and then when I put it on Facebook, he gave me hell, boy. You don't put that in there. The secret here is you dump a bottle of water on a railhead and then you get a great reflection. This is one of the rail fan engineers. Just included him, Chris Wallace. You'll see him on Facebook. Hell of a model railroader. He's a good engineer, and when he was on that engine, the 1218, you know. Hold on, Chris, gotta get a picture of him. And I guess I could have chopped some of these out, but it's all right. So right now, the 1700 is out at Altoona for work or periodic or something. Maybe that's it.
All right, we'll move on to the 663.
Okay.
Michael, have to dig up, I tried to take the time, 6670.
Yes, I wouldn't mind turning this thing around.
All right, you're back.
All right, the big feature. The F3s. Everybody knows the FTs were the diesel that did it, but the first improvement were the F2s and then the F3s. There were only a few F2s, but the F3s, this was a demonstrative set that was sent around the country. Lackawanna got it at Syracuse. And they loved it. And then it continued. This thing basically toured a whole lot of New England, including the Bangor and Aroostook. So the Bangor and Aroostook bought F3s, and you can see the paint scheme's a whole lot like the demonstrator set. So I guess they like the two-tone gray. This is, but when they arrived, they were number in the 500 series. This is the 506, which became the 46, which is the sister to ours up in Scranton. Initially, Tri-State was going to buy the 46. It was a runner, and that's the one we made the deal on. And then the Derby shop started taking it apart. And then it was an empty shell. So the Bangor and Aroostook felt bad, so they sold us the 44, which was still intact, and they were keeping it for their own use. And so they sold us the 44, and Anthracite bought the empty 46. So this is the Anthracite's engine and the sister to ours. And this is what ours looked like when it was delivered. If it was the 504, this picture is in 1954, and they'd already renumbered it to 44. And then in the later 50s, they went to this paint scheme, which frankly I like it. In fact, I wish they kept the darker gray and the blue. So this was an old square ectochrome, and here's what it looks like on Kodachrome. A little truer. This was 1958. David Sweetland took this picture. Dave was a good friend of ours, and he and I did a couple of books together, and that worked out. All right, so in the early 60s, they painted them. They went to the dip blue. And you can see our engine was a fan tripper from day one. This was Bangor and Aroostook, only the 46 was set up for passenger service. The rest of them were just, they had a steam boiler for passenger service. The 44 did not, and it was a regular freight one, but apparently it was they used it on a lot of fan trips. You know, see a lot of fan trip photos of the 44. Silver fuel tank. Look at all the fans. I didn't think there were that many fans in that part of Maine, but
Interesting combination with the BL2.
yeah, with the BL2, all the fans requested it. But it was just a common everyday freight engine, did whatever was needed. So and here it is on a wreck train. 1977. All right, in 1985, Tri-State and Anthracite made a deal to buy the two engines. And so this is June 1986, after a Tri-State meeting. Ben said they're down at Oak Island, so a bunch of us went down and took night shots at Oak Island. So they were going to Allentown, where the Conrail local would bring them to the Morristown and Erie, and their first stop was the Morristown and Erie. Ben Freeland agreed to keep the engine updated and blue carded, and he would use it in freight. That was 1986. We started working on it. We had committee meetings. Everything was going wonderful. Then came the 88 convention. But by the time of the 88 convention, the F3 committee got set up and quit, or the leaders did. And so we made a deal with Steamtown Foundation. They needed a diesel. And they agreed to paint this in the Lackawanna passenger scheme. So we needed a nose door headlight. So we shipped the engine to Scranton. Frank Riley made a connection at Transit that we could go down to E-Port and remove an E-unit door off one of the Southern Railway E-units that had been retired. So like 3 of us went down there, we got the nose door off, and it was in the back of my pickup truck. And those doors are heavier than you think. They're very heavy. So we drove it up to Steamtown, and they put it on. You can see they did some of the body work. They were going to get it running. And then while they were in the middle of this, they bought the 2 FP7s from what's his name down in Pittston, the scrapyard down in Pittston, and one of them was a runner. So Steamtown bought it and owned it. They'd rather own it than lease it. So that made business sense. So they sent this back to us, and this was after the Interregis convention. And so it was kind of forlorn, because the committee, you know, the club was financially strapped. You know, the committee got madder and madder, and the leaders of the committee got madder and madder. I didn't. I stayed in touch with this thing. So in the 90s, when the club was struggling for money, the board of directors wanted to sell the engine. And I argued with them that if you sell the engine, now you got no money and no engine. So we made a deal to, we talked them into, let's lease it to Anthracite with the other one. We shipped it to Pennsylvania. Anthracite painted it to match this one, because they moved these to Jim Thorpe, and they held a contest on deciding a paint job, $1 a vote. And somebody voted 10,000 times for the C&J orange. So that's how they got to be orange, and we painted ours to match. But frankly, they're running up at Jim Thorpe. This is the paint scheme that used to run up there. So it really fit. And this was the first time our engine ran. Ours is the one in the distance. We were to 57. They were to 5060. And those are actual CNJ numbers. There were no spare numbers. In the Lackawanna, we numbered one higher than the existing roster, and CNJ had the whole roster filled. So we just chose the next sequential number to them. But this is the first time it was running in Thorpe. And you can see the number boards aren't in it yet. We're still doing the details, but it was a fun time. All right, so Blue Mountain and Reading, George Hart passed away. And the Rail Tours operation that was leasing the Fs and giving us money for the Fs to maintain them, they stopped running. Blue Mountain and Reading bought the railroad, took over, and they didn't want to use. They wanted these Fs. They wanted to just take them, and they wanted to charge us a pile of rent. So one of the train masters on the Reading and Northern, it made him a nice deal, and Joe Van Horbeck together to buy a bunch of builders plates from somebody. So I called him, and I didn't tell him that Andy wanted to charge us a fortune for these things. I said, we're going to move them to Steamtown. Do you think you could just put them out, send them, bring them up to Pittston where the DL can get them? And he did. He never asked anybody, he just did. But we had a nice meeting with Steamtown, and they agreed to let us run these. The Reading and the Reading FP7s, they were regular runners at Steamtown, and then that crew got distracted and stopped running them, and Steamtown needed diesels. So we made a deal on these. If you let us paint them up there and do the body work, they're yours to use. And we have. We were talking about moving them to Morristown, but there was just really no not real opportunities to run one engine at Morristown. The two of them are really bookends. So Steamtown was the best deal for us at the time because we really had no other place to go with them, and it doesn't cost us anything rental wise. But when they're sitting in Jim Thorpe, this side of the engine was against the hill, never got any sun. So this looks horrible. The picture doesn't do it justice of how bad it is. These are the original panels. The EMD called them ply metal. They're two sheets of thin steel with a piece of plywood in between. And when the plywood gets moist, it just rots the steel from the inside out. So, and we also, in Jim Thorpe, some condensation got in the number 9 cylinder. So that was going to be our determining factor. If we could fix that cylinder. So we hired a mechanic who knew what he was doing to look at it. And here's another scene up at Steamtown once they were there. That's Bob Bars. All right, so we decided to fix the engine and we started the fundraising. And I don't know if this is the first time Kevin and Matt Fallon got involved in anything. But if you ever want to see those two without beards, here they are.
What years?
2010, March 2010. The Volunteer Railroaders Association offered to help us with the fundraising, and we teamed up to run an Easter Bunny trip to help seed the F3 fund to get it started. So we're all working together, putting out signs. We ran this trip on NJ Transit, and we made enough we sold it out, and we made enough on the trip that both groups got a nice piece of it, but at least it got us started on the F3 fundraising. And the two Fallon, Joe Fallon there too. Who's this guy? I forgot his name.
John Kroll.
John Kroll. That's it.
Whatever happened to Smith, Charles Smith?
He's in the Poconos, he moved.
Yeah, he moved. He adopted a couple of the kids, and
Yeah, got 3 kids.
Yeah.
3 adopted kids, and he's fine.
yeah, he still loves us.
He's complicated.
But Charles was a whole part of the working together with the two groups kind of thing. So. And with some seed money, we got started. And again, our MO has been to hire an expert, because volunteers are the most expensive labor you can get most of the time because they're inexperienced. We hire the experience, and the tools in his truck generally would cost more to rent than the fee you're paying him. And Mike worked very reasonable for us. He was and he loved doing this. So there's 440 panhead nuts and screws had to come out, and they were all rusted solid. So we ended up cutting every one of them out. And that's Mike Bass, who now owns the Allentown and Auburn, and everybody had a hand in it. We had like 50 different faces come up for these work sessions. And we had to start getting rid of rust. This is the nose. And you can see how rusty that nose was. The noses look like they're all this heavy steel. They're not, they're just sheet metal on a skeleton. And there's Dan Morgan, one of our stalwart members. And thank God for the young kids, because getting underneath the cab, there's only about that much room, and these guys, the young ones, could shimmy in there and clean things up, and none of us older ones could get in there. Us with bellies, you know. Here's Tom Kelsey pulling something off while I'm cutting. And you can see the rust underneath the nose door there. I forget his name too. There's Dan crawling out from underneath the cab. And Dan's quite a guy. He's only got one hand, but he was born that way. So he doesn't know any better. He knows, he makes it all work, you know. That's his father, the middle image there, that's his father, Rich Morgan. Dan wasn't old enough to drive yet, so Rich would drive him up and get involved. And there's Joe, master steel worker. We lost Joe a couple years ago. But Joe was a career welder, and he was a master of the stuff. Here's a shot you can only take in an F3. There were only things with chicken wires, and that's Doug Caputer. Oh, the father. What's his father's name? What's Doug's father's name? Ken Caputer. That's Ken Caputer. He was coming up with Doug. He's needle scaling the screen area underneath the air vent. So we still have more panels to remove, but we're getting there. Steamtown let us work outside. They would never do that today. They would never allow this kind of stuff to hit the ground. We collected as much as we could, but Anthracite got in the shop before we did. Their engine was in much better shape than ours body wise, so they could go right to work painting and we couldn't. So we had to, we had to get all this stuff done, but. And there's the motley crew, and one of the days Jim Boyd took this photo. He used to come up and help where he could. The lady next to bars and between bars and I, that's Sharon Materko. That's Mike Materko's wife or widow. Mike Materko was one of the prime movers in the club back in the '80s, and he led the charge to help buy the F3 back then. So when they were in Jim Thorpe, we named the engine for him, and we put his name under the cab window. So she was coming up, and that's her husband on this end. He was a plumber. He's a full-time self-employed plumber. So he came up and did all the sand lines, brake lines. He did all kinds of plumbing stuff that and he whizzed right through it. So once we were done with the body work, they moved us inside so we could start painting and reassembling the engine. And meanwhile, or not, let's just start stripping it and doing the body work. Meanwhile, the anthracite engine was already outside the shop. So we couldn't sandblast in there, so we had to find some other method. So we rented a pressure washer that would heat, and the thing uses diesel fuel, and it gets the water up to 190 degrees, 200 degrees. Let me tell you, that's far better than sandblasting, because the paint just peels right off. It just melts the paint. It doesn't do any damage, it doesn't remove any steel, and it doesn't get in the journal boxes or any of the bearing surfaces inside the engine, which sandblasting does. You got to cover everything when you're sandblasting, even if you're using any of the non-mag, but the paint just fell right off. It was even quicker to sandblasting. All right, and once we got that done, Joe goes to work. Nice thing about working at Steamtown is they got piles of steel everywhere. We just found the right steel, cut it, bent it. They got rollers there that'll shape and bend whatever you need. So Joe's doing his magic. That's Mike Bass holding down the piece while Joe secures it. Well. Grind it so it looks like the factory did it. You can see how happy Joe is. He just loves this stuff, and he's a master at it. And yours truly came along with the Bondo. Made the seams go away. And of course, in the process of bondoing, we filled in the holes where the grab irons go. So Joe's in there with a torch opening up the grab iron hole. And then comes the tedious work, chicken wire. You realize why EMD got rid of the chicken wire. And why EMD often did not paint through the chicken wire. You look at the builder's photos of these engines, and the stripes did not continue through the chicken wire. So it was tedious work, but you still have to rust inhibit the chicken wire. And we had 3 or 4 guys just scraping, brushing. But we're making progress. You can see how good the steel looks once you fix it up, get rid of the stuff you don't need. We had a buy a panel campaign for $250. You could buy one of the side panels. And we found a steel company in Pittston who would make the panels to the EMD spec. And they welded a piece of trim along the side of the panels to build up the thickness of the original ply metal. And that worked out great. Now we got all steel. We powder coated them gray so that they'll stay that way. And we sent the batten strips out and had them powder coated. And that's Sharon Materko. She's scupping so we could paint over those, because you can't, paint the powder coating won't hold paint, but you got to scuff it up and sand it down. But still, it's a great finish. And here we are putting the panels back in. 440 pan head screws and nuts. And so we had to be on both sides of each one. That's Mike Bass, strong as an ox. Barry Levitt, who little guy, strong as an ox, and myself, who holds his own. That's Mark Rosner, short line magnate in his own right now, he's running. One of the roads in Delaware, I forget the name, but he came up and helped. It's just amazing how many people come. This is Rich Wisniewski taking part in the tedium. Inside, I meant to get rid of one of those. Here's Tom Kelsick doing his share of tedious work. There's Bob Goen and Lloyd Leone. Working both sides of the nuts and screws. That one's out of order. There's Mitch Dackelman. We had found work for Mitch. There's Barry Levitt again.
Joe was here.
Surprise, Barry. So one of the Steamtown docents, when he was given the tours around the roundhouse, he had this model he pulled out of his pocket and would show them that this is what these engines are going to look like. And I thought, that is cool. There's a park ranger that really cares. So I forget his name. I got it written down. We're producing newsletters twice a week, email newsletters for the committee, and they all got lost in a website overhaul, but which is too bad. I must have an email somewhere, but couldn't resist setting it up. Or this was the dream. This was the plan. So we go to work. The NRHS convention was in June that year, and that was our deadline. Rail fans work best with a deadline. So that's Tom Schmader up on the roof in the chrome cap with the polka dots, and that's yours truly. We're all sanding. All right, the man on the right is Kip Hagan. He's one of the heroes in this whole thing. He was the superintendent of Steamtown. He grew up in Scranton. He remembers the F units in Scranton. And when we made the presentation, I dug up a bunch of pictures of F units in the shop, because the Steamtown shop was designed to maintain F units by EMD. And I included a bunch of pictures of F3s helping steam engines, pushing steam engines alongside steam engines, saying, you know, you can't tell the story of steam without showing what Vanquish did. And these things are steam era diesels, you know. Oh, he loved it. And he pretty much whatever we needed from the park, he supplied. We lost him soon after these things were restored and running. Suddenly, that was a tough thing. But Kip, we'll never forget Kip. So here we are priming. We sanded everything we could. Prime. Meanwhile, anthracite, these units, the striping on these units took far longer than either group planned on. And anthracite was 3 or 4 weeks striping this thing, and there wasn't time left to stripe ours. But when they got this far along, the rail pace sent a photographer to get a picture for the magazine, and I saw this and just laid down on the rail and got a quick shot, and I liked it, you know. And so did Rail Fan and Railroad. And so it became the cover of Rail Fan. So. And we did a story on it. So what we decided to do, since we didn't have time to finish painting ours, Lackawanna had 9 of these. They decided to do something austere and paint them gray, just solid gray, no stripes, just to get them out of the shop quicker and save some money. They weren't popular with the railroaders or the customers, and so we started shooting just the gray. We reversed our plan. We got made up different lettering, so that, you know, a negative instead of a positive. We put the nose logo on, but didn't trim it properly, because the yellow when we put the gold on it, it'll be trimmed properly. So here we are, we're getting those stencils. This is all paint. We didn't do any stencils. There's no stencils on this thing. We painted everything. We bought stencils, spray painted, and pulled them off. So there we are, pulling it off. We're very careful with this, because if the logo's not right, if the herald's not right, then the rest of it. So, and what good's an engine without number boards? That's Dave Rush. His father and grandfather were Lackawanna engineers. He was a career sign painter, and when he was a kid, he was working for the sign painter who painted the steam engine tenders and the station signs, so he knows sign making. So he made up the number boards at his house. I went and picked them up after one of the work sessions. That's his house on Lake Lackawanna. And back to work. That's Justin Kirchner. He came up for the work sessions. His hobby is rebuilding horns. So we gave him our horns, he put new diaphragms in them, completely rebuilt them. That's Dan Morgan inside. And again, every nut has a head that you gotta do both sides of it. So we are putting the grab irons back on. There's Justin and I working together. That camera, by the way, I brought it. It's right here. I bought this camera just for this project. It was my first foray into digital photography. And $29, $39, whatever it was, but I wanted a camera I didn't care about. You know, I could stick it anywhere, I could reach in anywhere, it could sit in my pocket, get paint on it, I didn't care. But it documented this thing. And he brought back the horns. Now, here's a guy that collects horns, restores horns, knows everything about horns, but he's afraid of heights, so he won't get on the roof. So I'm sure he's not the one who's been stealing the horns. But and those are the bronze nuts and bolts that hold us secure to the inside. But here's what the gray engines look like on the Lackawanna, not popular. This is a Mike Wickman photo. Made the cover of Anthracite Railroad Historical Society's Flag, Diamonds and Statues. They did a piece on these. And that's what ours look like. We didn't do the yellow grabs because they weren't going to be yellow on the finished engine. So that's Tom Kelsick taking a picture. I couldn't resist but take a similar image. Just I figure it'd be part of a slideshow someday. But that's what the gray engine looked like. You can see why the customers and the railroaders didn't like it, but it did the job. And that's again, we're reinstalling the roof. That's Justin in the back. That's in the front is David Monteverdi. In the back is Michael Thomas. Both of them are partners in Genesee Valley Transportation. They own the Delaware Lackawanna, and they were generous contributors to the F3. Both of them wanted to see this done, and they both separately, personally wrote checks. So very grateful to them. They're real good friends, known them 30, 40 years now. David used to be a columnist for Rail Pace, used to edit the Western New York column. Worked for Kodak in Rochester, and we bought a diesel and started leasing it out, and that's how it all started. But and we did the gray engine. Anthracite was finished. The anthracite engine was in the roundhouse for that night shot, but this gray engine got more ink than the other F unit did, just because it's special, and everybody knew it was only temporary. So we only did it for the convention. So only the conventioneers will see it. So this was one of the pros night shots with it, and I was in the cab working the headlights. That's Kenny Gans down here with the fedora. And I forget who the crew guys are, steam crew guys are. So it's convention time, and in amongst our work session, Steamtown's building their live steam railroad. Seth Corwin on his knee, well, with his hiney tortoise, and Chris LeBar helping him do joints. And kind of neat, they let me run their engine. I've also had the chance to run the engine behind it too. It's now out of service. So it's neat place. In this era was Jurassic Park, you know. And this live stream, and this was right near our work session, right near where we were working on the F. I mean, out of the frame, 20 feet was our F3 outdoors as we're striking it. So, all right. So after the convention, after the Gray Ghost, I went on a honeymoon for a couple of weeks. And then after that, we're putting the stripes on. So that's David Rush. He's helping us starting to lay out the paint scheme. And Dave's a master at this stuff. And of course, here's the drawings, one of the ones that purloined from EMD. And we had copies made. And what's interesting is that that's the nose curve. And all they give you is one curve. Your plan is you tape it up, make your marks, and then flip it upside down and do the other side. So I just made 2 copies and put them both up because to me, they have to be perfectly symmetrical. And I wanted to see it. I wanted to get back 200 feet with a telephoto lens and make sure it's perfectly symmetrical before any paint flew. There's Dave making his little cuts. He had a pounce wheel where he makes perforations and you hit with the blue chalk and mark your lines. And I tried looking up what his name is. He's the painter we hired to help us. And the guy was great. His forte was painting drum kits. And if you ever see a drum kit where you've got the metal flakes that look like they're 2 inches deep in the paint, you know, he does that. He did that to an automobile once, and the driver got pulled over, so the car's too distracting, you can't drive on the road, you know. Because it had to finish like a drum kit, but the guy is a master painter, so skillful, and he's still doing it. He actually had, I believe he had a small heart attack while he was working with us on the 100-degree days. But he recovered, but there we are laying out the curves. You can see we got both sides. And believe me, we didn't do any masking until I was sure it was 100% correct. I mean, we did the masking, but check, double check, triple check. Because these stripes are everything. And then comes the chicken wire. Having to paint and mask through the chicken wire. We're cutting out little triangle pieces of masking tape and putting them in between the chicken wire. There we are in the shop. 4,000 feet of masking tape we used. On our engine. I don't know what anthracite is. And that was Celtic scuffing the paint. You know, we shot the maroon for the lettering for the so once we got a mask, we sprayed the maroon, then we sprayed the gold later. Yeah, Tom took that one, reflection. And we polished up the kick plates for the steps. Tom put them on, nice and sealed up.
Yeah.
I should have meant to put that in a different, Dave Lindstrom. Tapping a screw hole, so we could put a screw in it, Lloyd Leone with his white yarmulke there. That's a breathing mask. There's Dave Lindstrom, he was mixing and filtering the paint for the painter. Let us spray. Amen. So there's the maroon side. And we start masking for the gold. And of the many controversies, it's hard to restore a piece of wood without getting somebody mad at you. And we had some members, Anthracite painted their engine gray and yellow. These engines weren't yellow, they were gold. EMD never used yellow except if the customer specified it and the Erie specified it, but that was one of the few roads that actually used yellow. Everything else was Dulux gold, including the Reading FP7s. So I wasn't going to use their yellow. I wanted to buy Imron in gold. It's Imron still makes Dulux gold because it's the color Caterpillar uses on its tractors, and they're a big buyer of Dulux gold. So I think DuPont will make that forever. So that paint chip came off the Erie 10. Peeled it off the door. That's the color gold and the color maroon. Those are micro scale decals. I helped them with those back in the 90s. And these are the DuPont enamels. So we find the right color. And but I remember getting a screaming phone call from one of our critics saying that you can't paint a different yellow than anthracite. You got to tell people. So I'm going to tell them one of them is correct. After this came the Norfolk Southern Heritage Project, where the fellow who owns the paint chips that I was using, Jack Wheelahan, he loaned those paint chips to Norfolk Southern. PPG mixed to those DuPont paint chips, paint samples, they're little steel plates about that big. And so PPG now makes Lackawanna maroon, gold, and gray, which are matched. And if anybody wants to buy auto paint for Lackawanna engines, you don't use industrial enamel on locomotives, you use auto paint. Industrial enamel turns to crap in a year or two. Auto paint holds just like do your car paint, and you can just order PPG, those Lackawanna colors, and they're there. So anyway, this is our color guide, and I painted a sample. And you can see it's real close to what's on the Reading FP7s. And here we go. It looks like Goulden's mustard when you put it on. But you need a full body outfit to spray Imron, so. I've sprayed Imron, it goes on like milk. I mean, there's no better paint, it's just so smooth, it covers in one coat, it's totally opaque, it's epoxy. So it's not even really paint, but it doesn't come off. And there's our painter, he's checking our masking. And again, I'm putting on the curves. Dave's mixing paint. We're shot the gold. And we're taking the masking off. Now we're getting ready to mask for the black. You basically have to mask both sides of every stripe. At some point. Now, the fact that we shot the gray first complicated it. We just shot probably the yellow first and put the maroon on top of it, then the gray on top of that. But because we wanted to do the gray first for the time for the convention. So then comes the black. I should have moved that. That's our number board. We painted it too in the Dulux gold. The stencil was on it. There's a story with those number boards. There's Barry again. We're putting the engine back together. There's the logo, the Herald, all trimmed out because it's 1 inch from the 1 inch from the door, from the edges of the door. The anthracite goes all the way to the door, so ours is more correct. All right, that black line is not a crack, that is just a crease pencil mark I made so it could center the bullet, but that bullet is neat, a neat part of the paint scheme. On the FTs, it was designed to wrap around the number box on an FT, and then they shortened it for the bigger number boxes on the F3s. And now for the unveiling. So, not quite finished in this picture, but the light was right. Yeah. All right, that's a paintbrush. We're touching up all the little overspray spots and everything. You just wanted the thing perfect. Little details, painting the fuel filler, Chinese red, which was the actual EMD color. That's Craig Ely from Anthracite. He made these ingenious little, took a big fiberglass sewer pipe. And basically it's a place to catch the airbox drippings. All EMD diesels have airbox drippings. And Steamtown doesn't want oil in the soil. So we made these little containment things. Every once in a while, we open the valve and fill the bucket with an inch or two, whatever's in there. And Steamtown's happy. They're painted black, so they look like original equipment. Air to finished engines. That was the first time they were together. And now ours is up front. They move them around, but they look sharp. There's our first periodic inspection, 92 day. They have pits, so you can crawl around underneath, check your traction motor brushes and do all your inspections. And here we are on the road. We kept the gray anti-climber on either side of the coupler. The EMD drawing doesn't specify what color those are painted. The Lackawanna had them both ways. Some of them are black, some of them are gray. So we kept it gray just as an ode to the gray ghost, and it helps you tell them apart. Because Anthracite painted theirs black and ours is gray. So at a glance, you can tell which engine is which from the distance. And here's one of our first road trips. You can see the rail fans on the other side of the tunnel. I was riding our trailing unit. It was 664 was leading eastbound and ours was leading west. There's our engine on the west end of that trip. Going by Matta Street Tower. This was down Pinkertown Road crossing right by the water gap. If that were an 80-car train, the hind end would be at the water gap station. Here we are at Cresco. See now that you see it, the gray anti-climbers stand out. You can see there's two little clips there. We put those on because we're gonna have to hang ditch lights. And then it turns out that our engines are about 2 months older than the grandfather clause on ditch lights, so we don't need them. So we didn't put them on, but the clips are there. If we ever have to add them, we can just clip them on that thing. That's what that's for, just a piece of box too. But they disappear in the gray paint. Beautiful. I love that little peak at the top. It's a Mitch Goldman shot with a little pan zoom in the fall colors. This was a planned meet, by the way. This wasn't a surprise, but timeless, you know, look at the cab of this thing. It's, there's really nothing out of place. Today, there's a radio, a modern radio in there, but other than that, still authentic. So work continued though, where batteries weren't charging and the batteries were bad, so we had to clean out the battery boxes, we raised some money, bought new sets of batteries. I forget who this is. Somebody's girlfriend came up and pitched in. There's Ed Kohler. Dressed the part. Working near the shop. Again, timeless. There's nothing out of place in that scene. Still the original jointed rail. Except the beard. Railroaders back then didn't have beards. All right, so the one of the trips back, trip this very day, Steamtown, the crews wrote it up that there's a vibration in the engine room. So went up there with Rich John and we put the engine in the roundhouse so we could look at it. There it is on the turntable being turned. It was it idles fine up to above notch 3. It starts vibrating. It started vibrating. So it turns out compressor, you had to pull it out. The bearings were bad on that. And then that main generator at the bottom and the auxiliary generator at the top, well, they're attached. So the main generator bearings were shot and it took one of the prime mover bearings with it. So raised a bunch of money. We sent this out to a company in Altoona who did a great job restoring it. The thing is a work of art. If you ever get to Scranton and we get you in the engine, we'll open up the windows and you can see all that beautiful copper work they did. But we wanted to keep the original generator, you know, not put a new one in. And the auxiliary generator is rebuilt. Now Anthracite's having a problem with that auxiliary generator on the B unit. So they're wrestling with what to do about that. They changed everything and it still doesn't work, but so we had to pull it out and change it. Meanwhile, back when Anthracite had the engines, we needed a set of wheels. So we got a grant from NRHS and raised some more of our own money, and we bought a brand new set of the hardest wheels money could buy. Figure we don't own the railroad, so we'll just put hard wheels on it so we never have to change them again. So in the process of doing that, Anthracite had the A unit and the B unit, and they had a CF7. They bought the CF7 to repower their F unit, the empty 46. In the process of doing all that, trucks got swapped. So we got the trucks from the Santa Fe engine, which were pretty freshly rebuilt. It's got new springs, new brakes. The trucks are really good shape. So those are under our engine with the brand new wheels. This is the F unit they came from, 262. And here we are on the trip, getting ready for Spencer shops. You know, a lot of the notable F units, cab units in the country were invited to Spencer for the and Norfolk Southern agreed to make the moves. So this was it. The ABA Anthracite painted the B unit real quick, and meanwhile our engine still wasn't running because the generator and the compressor went bad. So we're still in the process of fundraising. DL moved this stuff down to the NS interchange free. And here they are, they drag them down with the RS3 and they're waiting here for the NS to pick them up. And here they are at Spencer. The Southern Railway Roundhouse, and you know, gathering amongst all the other cab units. They were a big hit. So we get them back to Scranton. And we start going to work. We raise the money to. Get this rebuilt. That was about 12,000 and change. But it's as good as new. Power Rail sent that out to a place in Indiana to do that. Meanwhile, there's our new main generator. We hired 2 guys from NJ Transit. Who do this for a living. They know how to line this stuff up. This stuff has to be lined up within a couple of thousands. And that includes adjusting those giant bolts on the floor. It was neat to watch these guys work, and they got it all done in one day. So they were beyond worth it. And then they are, adjusting. Looks like he's looking at me, but he's looking at somebody next to me with a dial. Telling him what's correct. So with that done, we can go back to other details. There's some of the stainless steel kick plates. There's Kevin drilling holes for the builder's plates. Or the replica builder's plates. There's a happy Kevin. And Steve Falco. Steve Falco was coming up and he was a big help up there. He's a design engineer. Mostly electronics and computer programming, but the guy has got buku intelligence and he loves to tinker and fix stuff. So he was terrific. And there's the replica builder's plate in the actual place. When the project began, there was a way, how are we going to replicate these dual number boards? All right, this is a genuine O&W dual number board. Managed to get an audience with it because the guys who have these don't even want to show them to anybody. They're afraid they'll be offered something in trade and they don't want to do that. But you can see those reflectors. Those are made by Rayflector. So among the EMD drawings, we've got the drawings for these. So Rich John found a shop that would make the actual steel plate out of stainless. But the reflectors, they use Scotch Light behind it and made up Lexan jewels, but an antique store found this old stop sign. And those are the very same reflectors. Reflectors sold them to everybody, bicycles, trucks, anything. So there were just enough in there to fill out our sign. And I think you have that in your garage, don't you? The sign?
It's in my office.
Yeah, it's in your office. So we took it apart. There's the jewels. We found the best of the jewels. And there they are. So when you take a strobe of that, it's going to look like 1948. These are originally indie step treads. Steve drilled and tapped and finished those up so we can reinstall them. After a few years, all that great work we did to inhibit rust, we still got rust. But Kevin went up there with a grinding wheel or a buffing wheel and fixed it all. Looks great. So it was one of our goals. You can see the black anti-climber. And the dual number board mounted there. There's ours. And of course, there's Lackawanna unit with the gray anti-climber. There's the 660. We kind of use 662 as our template. But there's 663 in black and white. That's our baby. And for those who say it's a freight engine, that's the freight scheme. It should be hauling passenger cars. Lackawanna hauled passenger trains with the freight engine. In 1949, they renumbered these engines. They covered up the 605 for some reason. We think it's accounting. We never found anybody that knew why they did this. They did it to one of the 800 series too. But and of course, there's freight F's pulling a PV snow coach. There's a 662. This was the delivery of the first coach. Here it is at Summit for everybody to look at it and go through it and see what they think. And there's one of the pictures from the Steamtown presentation that look, Epps and Steam, they ran together. Complete with the open nose door. So here's some shots of our baby on the road. We took it out, we got the flag holders in the correct place. And looks mighty nice. This is a Cobb's Gap, the original. The original predecessor of the Lackawanna was the Delaware and Cobb's Gap, and this is for which it was named. Here it is at Cresco. This was just last fall. It was a car show at Cresco, so the Steamtown ran an excursion down to the car show. There it is clawing its way up the Poconos. This is a Mount Pocono station. The PennDOT station is right to my rear. Coming out of Nail Tunnel. And we haven't forgotten Mike Paterko. And again, that's not a plate that's painted on, so it doesn't come off and nobody can steal it. So, and thank you very much. Any questions? I still have the hat I wore during that whole thing too. It looks like hell. I meant to bring it. So, and again, here's the camera. That took most of those pictures. So,
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
well, those engines right now are still national treasures. They're part of the park. And it's when you think of Steamtown, because they're not really running much steam, they think of the Lackawanna F. So we did a great thing up there. And you know, we're part of the national story, and I thought it was neat that in 2013, trains ran this must-see diesel. You know, and the F3's got the most votes, so they were the must-see diesel for 2013. They never ran another contest, so we're it. Yes, sir.
I have a question. We were gonna do some work on them so that they could go over 25 miles an hour or something. Is that completed?
Yes, they weren't making transition.
Okay.
And we hired a guy named Mike Schreiber from Silcott Services. And the guy's electrical whiz. He came out with his laptop. He had all the EMD maintenance manuals, the MIs, the maintenance instructions, and schematics. And he knows where everything is. You know, we can look at a schematic. Okay, this line goes over here, but where's over here? You know, he knew where everything is. We replaced. I think there was one resistor was bad, and a piece of wire we had to replace. And then we got Steamtown to let us take it out for a test drive, and it made transition. It's beautiful. I mean, the guy, he's worth every penny we paid him, because again, he got through this in an hour. He knew what was up and got it done, you know. So
We had a question online. How many months did it take from the time into the cosmetic restoration?
we started in April, as soon as the weather broke. And we had it finished in June for the convention. The convention was like the June 22nd or something. It was like the last week of June. So we were done. We finished it in time for the convention. So it was basically 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And it took us a little while after that to get it running again. We got the new number 9 cylinder in it and got everything adjusted, but it's interesting, the story of the F3s. In the beginning, Anthracite was having trouble with 664, so 663 was going out all the time. And then until it wore out, and then we changed everything that went bad. In that time, the 664 was running fine. So they were using 664 all the time. So it just, but this year they're both in good shape and they're both running. So we're looking forward to seeing them together. And the B unit is close. Again, the auxiliary generator is their latest nemesis. So once we come up with a solution for that. Yeah. Yes, Gary, you had a.
Ask about the video.
Oh, yeah, it's ready to go. It even makes power. It's just you need the aux gen to keep all the little stuff running. So, any other questions? Yes.
And that North Carolina, when you showed, you said this is North Carolina, that North, it was Spencer, North Carolina, what portion of North Carolina is it in, you know?
Central West.
Is it along the coast or not?
No, it's inland.
Near Charlotte.
Yeah, it's near Charlotte.
It's a long day's drive from here.
Well, when we went to Spencer, I worked 12 hours, left work at 9 o'clock, drove 12 hours, got there at 9 o'clock. And spent all day taking pictures of meeting people, stayed for the night shots. And then finally got a couple hours sleep. I shared a room with Walt Hoffman, who was the ARHS president at the time, so. The two presidents, we had the presidential suite, you know, and we both had CPAP machines, so that was kind of fun. And we were both equally overweight at the time, so. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
everybody at home.
You had about 70 people.
Cool.
All right, thank you everyone for attending. We are now on our summer break for July and August. We'll be back here on the second Thursday in September. We will announce that presentation when we have the information available. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Video of the horn blow.
I think you're standing in front of the camera, although I think it's over.
I have video of the horn blow on YouTube.